Grant writing. Creating a sound budget that is well justified by the budget narrative. The budget portion of a proposal establishes how funds will be spent if awarded and provides explanation for why those expenditures are necessary. This video will provide guidance for writing a sound budget that is well justified by a budget narrative. The more detailed the budget is, the easier it will be to justify the expenses reflected there, and the easier it will be for reviewers to understand how funds will be spent. Whenever possible, be as specific as you can. Staffing is often a large part of costs. Note all personnel that will be included on the project, including any administrative time for project management, childcare workers, and actual delivery staff. List each position separately and the number of hours per week or full-time equivalent they will spend on the project. Then be sure to describe in detail each person's duties and explain why each role is important for implementing the model or managing the grant. For curriculum or manual purchases, be sure to note the full name of the program, authors or developers, and version. If more than one is purchased, note how many, and note any discounts for bulk purchases in the budget. In the narrative justification, note specific developer requirements and provide more detail about who will use each resource purchased. When purchasing additional materials, it is okay to describe these generally in the budget as supplies, but be sure to clarify that they are for program implementation and not just general office supplies. Then in the narrative, explain how additional materials will support implementation, including examples of what activities they will be used for. Meals are often an allowable expense, particularly if they are a required component of a program, and these should be listed as meals for participants as required by developer. Be sure to include not only food costs, but other meal-related supplies. In the budget narrative, list how many meals will be provided for approximately how many participants. Incentives, as required by the program, or as a part of a recruitment and retention strategy, are often allowable expenses. Be sure to describe these in detail, particularly the amount and number of any gift cards that will be purchased. Then in the budget narrative, describe the distribution plan and the purpose for each type of incentive. Training costs include fees paid to developers or trainers, as well as costs related to paying for their travel and any meals or materials needed for the training. Be sure to itemize each of these in the budget detail and list the purpose and time frame for each training that is planned. Don't forget certification fees, fees for follow-up trainings, or consultation calls. Travel expenses are typically of two varieties. One, those that are incurred by staff who are attending training. These can include airfare, mileage, hotel, and/or per diem expenses. Or two, travel expenses related to delivering the program, for instance, traveling to different sites or picking up participants for a group. Either way, these costs should be broken down into separate line items in the budget detail. Be sure to explain the reason that each type of travel is necessary in the narrative. Rent and utilities are sometimes allowable expenses and should be listed as separate line items when possible. In the narrative, be clear why additional space must be secured. Is it for program delivery, or is it to house new staff? If only a portion of rent or utilities will be included in the budget, explain the rationale for the percentage used. Printing, copying, and office supplies are typically an important budget item for program implementation and should be included. Note these differ from program materials that will be used with participants during delivery. Evaluation costs, particularly when using an outside evaluator, are a common part of a grant budget. Include the number of hours or deliverable that is being purchased from the evaluator in the budget detail. In the narrative section, explain the amount of time the evaluator will spend and what activities and deliverables they will complete for the project. Marketing the program may be an allowable expense. Be sure to list the particular form of advertising that will be purchased, items like brochures, newspaper or radio ads, and the cost of each. In the narrative, explain the rationale. What is the goal of the marketing product or service being purchased? For instance, is it to recruit participants, promote awareness of the problem being addressed, or to highlight program successes? Equipment and software can also be important and necessary purchases. Be sure to list each item and the cost separately, and then the narrative explain how it will support delivery of the program or analysis of evaluation data. To recap, provide as much detail as possible within the budget and budget narrative sections of a proposal to ensure that all expenses are understood as important and justified for the program implementation.